Hey everyone, I'm Baron. Welcome back to the channel, and this is your Brain on Books. Today I wanted to rank my favorite series in all speculative fiction, and that is The Dark Tower by Stephen King. I first discovered this series pretty early on in reading fantasy. I did what everyone does, kind of jump online and see what the greatest stuff lists, and I would always see the Gunslinger on there amongst other titles. So I had the house free to myself for the day, and I went to Barnes & Noble, and I ended up picking up Elantris by Brandon Sanderson, my first Sanderson novel. We'll talk about that another time. And The Gunslinger. Now, I sat down, opened The Gunslinger, I read the entire book in a single sitting. I was completely blown away. This was the first time I had the experience of fantasy not being typical, kings and swords and dragons and stable boys and everything that we associate with fantasy. Another thing that I really love about not just ranking the Dark Tower, but watching other people's rankings, is they're so different all over the road, because this is really a genre blending series overall. So if people are coming to this, as typical King horror fans, they're going to have a certain set of books that they really, love. If you're coming from a high fantasy fan base, then, you're going to have a different set of books. And I don't think there's any general consensus amongst any of the Dark Tower fans, which I think is really cool. You don't see that so much in other series. So I'm going to go and start it off. Number 8 on my list would be The Wind Through the Keyhole. Now, I should put a disclaimer that there isn't a single entry in this entire series that I do not love. So even still, The Wind Through the Keyhole is a fantastic book. It's kind of fairy tale-esque, story within a story within a story. Nothing technically wrong with it. I did enjoy reading it. It's just kind of outside the typical narrative of the Dark Tower, to where it's not really a necessary entry. So for that reason, it's really hard for me to consider it in the, hold it in the same regard as I do the other entries. And I would say the same for any like the Robin Firth entries, the Jake Lee like graphic novels, or Little Sisters of Illyria, or any of the other companion material. I would kind of lump it in the same category here. So moving on to the primary novels, number 7. This might be a surprise to some. Wolves of the Kala. Now, one thing I love about Stephen King as an author is he's such a good character writer, and he has a lot of books that are basically just people in a town just living and just kind of you just enjoying their day to day, and you really get to deep dive and get in the minutia of what their life is like, and it's a good character study overall. I felt like he went for that in Wolves of the Kala, but just it didn't hold up compared to a lot of other Stephen King novels and even entries within the Dark Tower that do similar things. Now, there is a character that's introduced that has a lot of multiverse connections into this. I found that character's backstory very, very interesting. That was my favorite part, but our actual quartet that we're following throughout the story, I was kind of bored with what happened in this book. You're doing a whole lot of waiting around for 50 pages worth of action. So moving on from there, this is what a lot of people have as their least favorite. And for me, that is Song of Susanna. Now, there is some issues with this novel, and it's really because it's kind of a bridge between books 5 and 7. I personally believe that 5 and 6 could have just been condensed into one large novel, and it probably would have solved a lot of the issues with both of them. However, there's a lot of really, really cool, just kind of metafiction stuff that happens in here. Some really out there choices that Stephen King made. And for that, I just have so much respect for what he did in this book that even some of those pacing issues, I'm willing to overlook them. Very good read. Now going on from there, what are we on here? Number 5 would be The Wastelands. Now, a lot of people really love this. I see this on the top of a lot of lists, and it is a good book. It's your more typical Tolkien-esque quest story, right? The only part that I didn't love about this one is it tries to tackle so many different topics and so many different themes that I feel like it just kind of buckles under its own weight at times. However, there are some incredible scenes in here. I really don't want to get into spoiler territory, but there's some edge of your seat moments for sure. And you have a very unique character introduced at the end. For those of you who have read it, I think Blaine the Pain is pretty neat. And there's tons of nods to Tolkien in here that are very cool. Moving on from there, The Gunslinger. This is number 4 on my list here. I love this right out of the gate. It's only number 4 because it's a short book. It's narrow in scope compared to the others. But the atmosphere in this novel just completely blows me away, what he did here. And the fact that he wrote it so young. For those of you who aren't familiar, this was originally written as entries into Science Fiction and Fantasy magazine, which was then later compiled into a novel. And King wrote this when he was a teenager. Like, it's a little pretentious in some of the prose, and he admits that himself, but I can't get enough of it. I think it's a fantastic read. And I've actually, out of all the Dark Tower books, it's the one I've read the most. Now, moving on from there, my third favorite would be The Drawing of the Three. Now, this just blew me away. It's almost kind of like a James Cameron 1980s action movie kind of thing. Portal fantasy. It was like that whoa moment when you go from The Gunslinger and it's almost this like dystopian Western kind of fever dream-esque story. And then you go into this extreme portal fantasy. And now you're jumping into New York City and you have mobsters and all this other kind of stuff. It just was a lot of fun. I couldn't put it down. I blew through this book in a couple days. Going on from there, number 2, and that is none other than The Dark Tower, the final book in the series. Now, there's controversy around the ending. I loved the ending. I thought it was genius. This book does everything that I love in the series. It has the metafiction components, it has horror, it has science fiction, it has great character work, it has impactful emotional moments. It just does it all. It's a big book. Took me a little while to get through, even though it is a fast reading novel. Any of the Dark Tower books, you can't really pay attention to page count because you'll get through them pretty quick. But yeah, just a fantastic read. I love the ending, if anyone's ever curious. And if you hadn't guessed, that means my final book on my list, an absolute favorite, is Wizard and Glass. Now, not only is this my favorite Dark Tower book, it's not my favorite Stephen King book. That still goes to it. But this would probably be number 2. It does everything that I love about Stephen King. This is a coming-of-age tale. It is incredible character work, creepy villains in here. Just plays with tons of different genres, jumps around, very whimsical in nature. And I just think that this is just peak Stephen King. This is him writing at his best. This is before his accident. There was a big shift in tone to the books with the last 3. And I think that first run of novels, this is the critical mass where like everything came together. You learned so much about the world and Roland and everything else. This book just got me good. In the ending, oh man, it was so impactful. Even just thinking about it, I'm getting the feels right now. So anyway, I plan on having some additional Dark Tower content coming down the road. Like I said, this is my favorite series. I have a lot to talk about. Would love to do some spoiler discussions with anyone. But just so you kind of know where I stand, which books I like, which books I don't like, there you have it. Like I mentioned before, everybody has widely different opinions on this series. I'd love to hear yours. Leave them below. And until next time, goodbye.